Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination connoisseurs in association with Road to Perdition writer Max Allan Collins presents True Noir, the Nathan Heller casebooks, based on Max Allan Collins' 19-volume detective series about Nathan Heller, once a Chicago PD officer turned private eye to the stars, starring Picard Season 3's Todd Stashwick, who played Liam Shaw in the role of Nathan Heller. Check it out, coming to a crowdfunding campaign near you. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the maybe never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am Robcasting at you, imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. I'm, of course, Robcasting at you from the Robservatory, and this is Robservations episode number 919. Wow, that's a lot. 919 episodes. I can't believe I'm still here. My God. You know, I wanted to make this. I have come here not to bury Caesar, but to praise him. Credit where credit is due episode. But before I get to that, I'd like to read a couple of comments that were left on a few of my YouTube shows over the past couple of days. This one comes from user-sk numbers, letters. And this is why you've gone from being one of my favorite YouTube commentators to one I avoid. So you don't mind what you're called, cool, but for some of us, not calling us by the name, gender, etc. we prefer isn't nothing. It's meant as a means of conspicuous disrespect. But I get it. As a cis-het white dude, this isn't something you really have to deal with. But it's seriously disappointing that you couldn't step outside to really understand how it might be a sticking point for those of us who this is an issue for those of us who calling us by some other gender is meant as an insult, one that we can't possibly miss or dismiss. How this is difficult for people to understand is beyond me. It's pretty basic. Yet so many people, usually white, cis, het dudes. It's just disappointing that someone who clearly is interested in inclusion in your Midnight Musing show can have so little disinterest in other ways, choosing instead a thoughtless, reflexive, reactionary mind frame. But that is who you are. And who I am says to me, why watch someone who has so little understanding of what is hurtful to others? Why not find creators who take the time to understand others' POV? So no, you don't have to call me anything. I'm not interested in ruining you, but I don't have to watch you. And if people I know mention you, I have no problem telling them why I don't watch your content. From there, they can make up their own choices. lot to unpack. The funny thing about that is I think that, this channel is really predicated. It was originated on the idea that every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. The problem is, it's very difficult to find that mindset in the rest of the world. Now, the point that I was making, the larger point that I've always made on this channel, is that I was taught from a very young age, when I walk out the door and I go into the world, I cannot expect the world, nor does the world owe me anything. I can't expect to be treated a certain way. I can't expect it to be considered in a certain light, because the world does not care. The world, like the universe, like Stanley Kubrick said, is indifferent. Now, is it up to me to make the world care? Maybe. That's what the work is for. That's what the movies are for. That's what this channel is for. And maybe from my point of view, or from my position here in the Robservatory, I can affect a little bit of change through what I believe. But I will never try and impose myself on anyone's right to live their lives the way they want to. It is not up to me to expect that somebody is going to change their beliefs or the way they think simply because I demand it. Respect is earned. Now, I would hope through my good works, as people get to know me, they would respect me, and they would learn to appreciate me. And if I wanted them to call me something, no matter what it was, that they would appreciate my wishes and respect how I chose to be seen to the world. But that is earned. That is not something that should be given freely. If I want something from people, I need to earn it. I need to make them understand who and what I'm about. And hopefully, when I've done a good job doing that, then they will afford me the respect and courtesy that I hope that I've earned and deserve. But you know what? I'll tell you what I don't like. Somebody who's demanding something of me, and then at the same time, in the same paragraph, starts going off about white, cis, het dudes. Talk about muddling your message. Wow, I mean, that's 4 labels. I'm a white, well, that's true. Cis, I don't fucking know what that word means. I don't know why people use it. Heterosexual, doesn't that mean cis? Don't know. So if you're a cis, het, do those 2 words together mean something I'm unaware of? And a dude is, in a way, disparaging. So the message you're trying to deliver with this comment, you've undercut it all. So I stand by what I've said. Respect is earned. It is not given freely. And if individuals want respect, they have to earn it. And I've always believed that. My father taught that to me. And so I appreciate leaving a comment. But it's interesting when someone leads, and this is why you've gone from being one of my favorite YouTube commentators to one I avoid. Because I didn't give you what you wanted, or I said something you disagreed with. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I appreciate your position, and I've shared your comment publicly, and I thought that it was important to do so. But I'm not going to change my position. Respect is earned, and anyone who watches this channel for any length of time knows that I'm about as inclusive as it gets, and I'll call you whatever you want me to call you. But this comment isn't the way to go about getting me to do it, or is it bringing me around to your way of thinking? So, hey, it's a public comment. You left it for all to read. I appreciate you watch the show. But again, I'm not going to change my position. Respect is earned, and you cannot expect the world at large to know who you are or what you're about simply because you walked out into it. Anyway, figured I would begin with that before I jump into the positivity that I wanted to share today. The next thing that struck me when I got up, so last night I was very excited to watch the 4th season opener of True Detective, directed by Mexican filmmaker Issa Lopez. And Issa Lopez, if you know anything about her, she directed a movie that I really think is great, and I highly recommend it, called Tigers Are Not Afraid. I guess I would call it a horror film. Now, to be honest, I haven't seen the other movies that she's made. I've only seen Tigers Are Not Afraid, and I thought it was great. I really liked it. And she is the writer, director, and showrunner for this season of True Detective, which is set in Alaska, and it deals, well, so far it deals with the Inuit people, and it deals with the people that live in Alaska. And again, I tweeted that I liked it. I thought it was very atmospheric. It was what I wanted from True Detective. You have Jodie Foster, who is playing a variation on her Clarice Starling role. I kind of see her as a Frances McDormand character, like from Fargo, which we're going to be talking about a little later. And I thought it was quite good. But of course, I woke up this morning and everybody's triggered. See, to me, when you have a female director who's written female characters, and I didn't see them as disparaging anybody. I thought that it was exactly the kind of thing I expected. That's what I wanted to see. I think the two female leads, that the characters are at each other's throats. They really hate each other. I really like that dynamic. And for me, the storytelling really worked. I thought it was very atmospheric. But of course, there were people that were mad that it was shot in Iceland and not Alaska. And it really made me, it is bizarre to me. And it's funny because I was talking about this on George the Giant Slayer's show yesterday. Back when Jonathan Demme directed Philadelphia, Academy Award winning role for Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks played a gay lawyer who was dying of AIDS. Denzel Washington was the man he went to represent him. And it's a great film. Tom Hanks won an Academy Award for it. And what was interesting about that movie is Denzel Washington is us. He's the proxy for the audience. Because Denzel Washington, you can see it on YouTube. Watch the scene where Tom Hanks first goes into Denzel Washington's office. Now, at the time, we were about a decade into the AIDS epidemic, and many people had died. Whole creative communities had been decimated, and there were a lot of people that were fearful of AIDS. And that movie, because you had a major movie star like Tom Hanks, who everybody loved, playing this character, it immediately sympathized. It gained sympathy in the audience for him and his plight. I would venture to say that movie, Bruce Springsteen's title track, Jonathan Demme, a gay director, directing the film, Denzel's and Tom Hanks' performance, that movie gained a lot of sympathy and understanding for people that probably, before they went into that movie, didn't feel the way they felt when they came out of that film. That film changed minds. That film probably was a turning point for a lot of people and garnered a lot of sympathy where there was none. Now today, with our ridiculous activist culture, people would be saying, you can't cast Tom Hanks in the role of a gay lawyer who's dying of AIDS. You have to have a gay actor. Well, in a perfect world, perhaps, but you also have to make money, and you have to justify how many millions of dollars you're spending on a movie by casting people that are bankable, that audiences will go see. That is an economic reality that is above and beyond what people may or may not want. Now, did Tom Hanks take the role away from a gay actor who might have played his lived experience better? I would say no, because no one was the kind of box office draw at that time that Tom Hanks was. And I'm sure if there was somebody who was a gay actor who had the same clout, then maybe Jonathan Demme would have cast that actor. But putting Denzel Washington and Tom Hanks together in that movie, two of our greatest film actors of the last, each one of them has a 3-decade-plus deep career to go back on. Putting those two names together made sure that the most amount of people would go to see that film. And because of the way that film went, because of how it was told, because of the script, because of the direction, because of the acting, that movie changed minds. And if it wasn't made, perhaps our society, especially here in America, might not have been as sympathetic to the plight of people that were suffering from AIDS. The legacy of that movie resonates to this day. Now, Scarlett Johansson was going to play a trans character in a movie, and obviously the outcry caused that film to get scuttled, and it hasn't been made now. Who's to say? But if that movie was made with someone like Scarlett Johansson in the title role, it might have garnered a huge audience of people that might have learned something about the trans experience. Now, would you have wanted a trans actor to play in that role? Perhaps. But would people have gone to see it if they don't know who that actor is? Would it have got enough eyeballs on it? Could it have justified the cost? Because there's economic realities attached to movie making. It ain't show friends, it's show business. It ain't show activism, it's show business. That movie didn't get made because of the public outcry, because of the activist outcry. They killed the film. Who knows how many people's minds might have been changed by a movie like that? Who knows how many people might have been more sympathetic to the trans community and what the trans experience is? We'll never know because that movie didn't get made. Because people would rather bitch and moan and complain than allow perhaps what could have been a great film that could have been awards worthy. It could have been like Philadelphia. It could have changed minds, but it didn't get made because people would rather scream and yell and bitch and moan and complain, me, than allow somebody to do great work. And then we don't get it because of, look, here's the thing about the modern day. The modern day is all about the individual feeling as good as they want by doing whatever they think they need to do, whatever performance activism they need to participate in to make themselves feel better. But what are they making? What are they building? What are they achieving? I don't know. I mean, maybe awareness, perhaps. I'd rather see the creative efforts of a group of people coming together and making something, building something that didn't exist before. It's easy to go march, and I'm not saying that that's ineffective. It's not. It's always great to broaden awareness of certain issues, but it's a lot harder to sit down and make something. I'd rather see movies like Philadelphia get made and see how those kinds of movies, great movies, how they can change minds. Anyway, just my thoughts. Now, let's jump over to talk about, first of all, let me get back to True Detective. I really liked it. I know that there's a lot of people bitching and moaning and complaining, but I would say I'm all about authorship. And I think that True Detective, especially reading Issa Lopez and what she wanted to do, was really interesting, really, really fascinating. And her influences and why she made the choices she made, I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. I think this show is going to be great. The first episode I thought was really atmospheric, really spooky, really interesting. I want to see where it goes. And I think most importantly, she's been allowed to make the show that she wanted to make in partnership with HBO. She talks about, so when you're making a TV program, it's different than a movie. When you're making a TV show, you have to deal with your network and you get lots of notes. And as she said, it was both terrifying and maddening, but at the same time exhilarating because she was in a true partnership with HBO. And look, the proof is in the pudding. HBO is still, I think, the gold standard, the Tiffany standard when it comes to televised programming. We're celebrating the 25th anniversary of The Sopranos. David Chase he's been in the news a lot saying that television is becoming dumbed down. I would say that a show like True Detective shows that, no, it's not. And which brings me to my next point. Look, is True Detective going to wind up being great like seasons 1, which I thought was exquisite television? I really like season 3. Season 2 is a dip in quality, but there was still a lot of ambition there, and I enjoyed watching it. But I'm hoping that season 4 of True Detective, I'm really excited to get Issa Lopez's take on all this material and see where it's going. When she talks about being heavily influenced by David Fincher's Seven, I'm like, fuck yeah, man, count me in. So I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. What I'm getting from her is authorship. I'm getting a very distinct vision. And when you work with HBO, you're in a partnership with HBO, which I think is great. And what I've always wanted is to feel that there's somebody behind the camera and somebody behind the script pages that has a vision and is able to convey it to us. And when we have that, we should celebrate it and cherish it. Now, your mileage may vary, but hey, I think we should give it a chance. I think it's a great show, and I hope it continues to be good, and I want to enjoy it. So anyway, now, I'm not going to lie. I talk a lot about how Star Wars changed my life. There was nothing seen like that ever before on movie screens. I would dare say 2 years later from the same studio, 20th Century Fox, in the wake of Star Wars, Ridley Scott's second feature film after The Duelists, which, by the way, if you haven't seen The Duelists, Harvey Keitel and Keith Carradine, it's a beautiful film. I highly recommend checking it out. Ridley Scott's first feature. Alien was famously his second feature film. And you can look at Charlie de Lauzirika's great documentaries on the Alien quadrilogy set. You can watch the director's cut of the original theatrical version in 4K. But I would dare say I hold Alien up to be a perfect film. Some people would say, well, Rob, the display screens are not 16 by 9. Don't care. It's gothic science fiction future, a monster in space. Everything about Alien was as game-changing as Star Wars was in a different sort of a way. It was incredible. And I love the fact that it was a film about blue-collar, workaday, oil rig workers / truck drivers that were just doing their jobs. And then we all know the story of Alien, but after Alien came out, it was a thunderclap across cinema, the same way that Star Wars was, and it really changed everything that came after. How many Alien... Well, let's not call them ripoffs. Maybe Creature was a ripoff of Alien, but everything from Forbidden World to Galaxy of Terror, Roger Corman and James Cameron were over there. I mean, it's funny to me that James Cameron worked on movies like that and then went on and made Aliens. But Alien was one of the great franchises of all time. Now, what was interesting and what happened to Alien was Ridley Scott, he didn't write the movie, but I would still consider him an auteur. Because nothing looked like Alien before. It came out, it was revolutionary, and then he rolled right into doing Blade Runner, and those two movies have defined science fiction cinema even to this day in terms of aesthetics. Blade Runner is probably the most influential science fiction movie ever made, but Alien's probably a close second. Pretty amazing stuff. And unfortunately, the Alien franchise is also a perfect example of what happens when a franchise becomes a franchise and things go awry. I highly recommend, once again, it's not out in 4K yet, but pick up the Blu-ray of the Alien quadrilogy. One of the most illuminating documentaries ever. Some of my favorite documentaries on the making of movies that were made specifically for DVD and home video. One was Under Pressure, Making the Abyss, which we're going to get again in March on the disc. But also Charlie de Lauzirika's documentaries on the Alien films. I mean, obviously, his Dangerous Days documentary is amazing. His Prometheus, 4.5 hours of Prometheus, incredibly illuminating. But his documentary on the making of Alien 3, that's part of the Alien quadrilogy, is fascinating. Because, again, on one hand, you had David Fincher, an up-and-comer, a kid who worked at ILM, became one of the greatest visual stylists in the music video realm. And he was finally, a lot of guys came out of like the whole propaganda, people like Dominic Sena, Michael Bay, and David Fincher. They all came out of that sort of propaganda era. Even the guys that weren't at propaganda that started to direct music videos going over to film. I always think of them. I think of it as the propaganda era of filmmakers of the early to mid 90s when they all sort of took over. But so David Fincher was given Alien 3, which was a troubled production from the very beginning. It was a complete shit show. There was no script. Vincent Ward had tried to do his Wooden Planet with the monks, and that didn't work out. And by the way, you'll hear all about that in Charlie's documentary, so check it out. But what ended up happening with, once you have a franchise, And if you're not allowing, like, amazingly, James Cameron as an auteur comes in after the success of Terminator, which, by the way, turns 40. Terminator turns 40 this year. So what did Cameron do with the power he earned when Terminator became a huge hit on a very small budget? Well, he wanted to make Aliens. And, of course, he sold it to the studio famously. I don't know if this is an apocryphal tale or it's actually what happened, but he walked into a room full of Fox executives, and on a chalkboard he wrote Alien, and then he wrote an S with 2 lines through it, turning the S into a $, which he might have taken off the cover of John Stakely's novel Vampires, because that's what vampires did, that John Carpenter later made. By the way, if I could remake any John Carpenter movie, I would go back to the original John Stakely novel and remake Vampires. You can take that one to the bank, because that book kicks ass. And as much as I love John Carpenter, I don't think Vampires did the original source material the justice it deserves. Let's remake Vampires, shall we? And while you're on it, how about Glenn Duncan's The Last Werewolf? But that's just an aside. But anyway, the Alien franchise, I think of the Alien franchise kind of the same way I think of the Star Wars franchise. There are 2 great movies, and they're the first 2. Star Wars and Empire, Alien and Aliens. Fantastic films. And kind of everything after that, it's kind of like, you know what I think about? I think about Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, when they're going in to sell Kirk's glasses to get some money. And Kirk says to the guy behind the counter, the old man, "Is that a lot?" And he goes, Do you ever do that? Do you have like when somebody does a gesture, you remember it from one particular movie? Well, that's me. Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. It's kind of how I remember it. But, so anyway, the interesting thing for me when I saw Alien, I was 12 years old the first time I saw it, was the idea that there was a certain unknowability about the universe. We were never going to know who the space jockey was. We were never going to know the purpose of the alien derelict spacecraft. We were never going to know where those alien eggs came from or what was happening there. And that was kind of that sort of Lovecraftian, the old ones, the cosmic horror, the existential dread that you felt, which, by the way, I think science fiction author Peter Watts captured perfectly in his novel Blind Sight. Now, I can't recommend Blind Sight to everyone because it's a little dense, but if you want to read some really interesting alien-esque, I mean, it's not like alien-esque, it's not like Alien, but in terms of its feel of that cosmic horror, what's out there in the void that we're not quite ready for, Peter Watts' Blind Sight, check it out. And Exopraxis, which is another, anyway, I digress. So it was that cosmic horror that was so unbelievable. And what's interesting is, as the Alien series progressed, and by the way, on that same Alien anthology or Alien quadrilogy Blu-ray set, what's really great is the version of the assembly version of Alien 3, which makes it, I think Alien 3 is a very respectable movie, especially in the assembly cut. It's quite different from the theatrically released version. It's much longer. Charlie did a really terrific job putting that all together. I know David Fincher still disowns it, but it's really interesting to watch. And I think it's not a pleasant movie. It's not fun the way Aliens is fun, and it's not, I mean, Alien is scary fun too, even though it's pretty downbeat, but Alien 3 was really oppressive, and I don't know how much fun it was, but it's more fun if you watch the assembly cut. But anyway, what happened to the Alien franchise is kind of what happens to every franchise. Once it becomes successful, you have a lot of people who are putting in their 2 cents because it just becomes a product. It's not the product of auteurist thinking. And so you don't have somebody who, like James Cameron, stepped up and had a vision. Let's turn Aliens into a war film. Let's make it a Vietnam allegory, or let's make it whatever, a war allegory, call it what you want. And you play with genres. It's no longer a haunted house in space. Now it's Vietnam on on an alien planet with creatures instead of. And not only that, the power of femininity. I was talking about this on the show. The true power of Ripley had to be the heroine of that film because it was her feminine power of creation. The same way that she steps up against the alien queen, who also has the power of creation. And that her maternal instinct, her poor daughter Amy, growing up and dying while she drifted along in hypersleep, waiting, Amy grew up and died waiting for her mother, never knowing. And when Ripley finds this out, it's terrifying. And in becoming a surrogate mother to Newt, she finds the power she needs. She could probably have it anyway, but she finds the power she needs to prevail against that alien queen. That's how you make a female character truly great. You allow their femininity to fuel their power, which I miss. I like seeing that in movies, but I thought it was really, really extraordinarily well done in Aliens. But anyway, as the Alien sequels progressed, I mean, look, I love Jean-Pierre Jeunet. I do. I love City of Lost Children. I love Delicatessen. Amelie is one of my favorite movies of all time. But Alien Resurrection, I know he didn't write it. And I know that William Gibson wrote a draft of Alien 3. I know there's all these people that took a crack at it. But the problem was, it was just a franchise. Alien versus Predator. All of the cosmic horror, the existential dread that come with the xenomorphs and H.R. Giger's vision, all out the window, and it just became another product. Now, I think Prometheus was one of the most beautiful yet disappointing science fiction movies I've ever seen. I know a lot of people like it. If you get that Prometheus box set on Blu-ray, again, Charlie de Lauzirika was there when it was being made. One of the great looks into how a film is produced, and you can watch the movie kind of unravel. And to be fair, I think what this whole idea of going back to the Eric von Däniken Chariots of the Gods business, the ancient aliens and all that, the idea of the engineers, okay, but it was so simple. It was so sort of dumbed down. It would have been more interesting if the engineers were more unknowable, but that's just me. I think that Prometheus and then Alien Covenant took all the mystery. Apparently the aliens were created by a paranoid android, literally not a Radiohead paranoid android, but an actual paranoid android. Maybe Radiohead knew something that Ridley Scott didn't. I don't know. But it was really, it was reductive, and it made the universe of Alien a small place. And it bummed me out. Which brings me to, we are getting 2 new Alien projects this year. One is Fede Alvarez, who directed the Evil Dead remake and Don't Breathe. Big fan of what Fede did. He revived the Evil Dead franchise. I thought his version of Evil Dead was pretty damn good. Don't Breathe was certainly great, and he's doing Alien. Now, I've heard it's not called Alien Romulus, but everybody's reporting it as being called Alien Romulus. I'll just call it Alien Romulus until I hear any different. So he's, of course, got Alien Romulus coming out this year, a couple months from now. I hope it's great. But again, I'm sure it's going to be a variation on a theme. And we've been seeing Alien movies, and what I'm interested in is authorship, vision. Not to say that Fede Alvarez isn't going to deliver some horrific goods. I want to see them. But today, for the very first time, I got excited about the Alien franchise again. Actually, that's not true. Dark Horse Comics put out a couple of great Alien and Predator comics. And by the way, if the Alien versus Predator movie was an adaptation of that Alien versus Predator comic that Dark Horse put out, it would have been a great movie, and it probably would have been a big hit. And by the way, they can still adapt that comic, and it would work well. But again, Alien versus Predator, those 2 movies just took all the mystique out of the aliens. But today, as many people know, Noah Hawley is developing a Alien TV series. And I am very excited about it. Now you might say, come on, Rob, how can you be excited about an Alien TV series? Well, first of all, I'll tell you why. Because Noah Hawley is a great television creator. And I'll tell you, one of the greatest, most unsung TV shows and comic book adaptations is what he did with Legion. Legion, of course, Charles Xavier's son. I mean, I watch Legion and I've revisited it 4 or 5 times. I can't believe it even exists. Noah Hawley made that. He made Legion. That alone would endear him to me. But what he's done with Fargo, he took the Coen Brothers movie and you think, oh my God, someone's going to make a TV series out of Fargo. By the way, that's, I love the Coen Brothers Fargo movie. It's great. And I see what's going on with True Detective is sort of a variation on the Fargo theme. I don't think it's, girl power at the expense of white males. I don't think that's true at all. Give it a chance. But Noah Hawley, man, season after season. Now, not all the seasons are total genius, but are you watching, I call it the Juno Temple season because Juno Temple is awesome. Fargo has never failed to deliver great television. That's all Noah Hawley. All Noah Hawley. So you had my attention, as Calvin Candy might say, when Noah Hawley's going to do an Alien series. Because after seeing Legion, I'm like, okay. The guy who did Legion's going to do an Alien series that apparently is set on Earth. Now, I know. You might say, well, Rob, you're being way too optimistic. It's probably going to suck. Okay? Very well could suck. But there was an article today in the Hollywood Reporter, and I want to share it with you because this article, more than anything, why am I pointing? I'm like gesticulating or something. I want to read what he says, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be as excited about. Actually, this is on the Hollywood Reporter on the 13th. I apologize; it was over the weekend. On the 13th at 10:23 a.m. Emmy winner Noah Hawley is teasing his highly anticipated FX Alien prequel series. The Fargo showrunner was recently interviewed by KCRW's The Business, hosted by Hollywood Reporter editor-at-large Kim Masters. Hawley was asked by interviewer Eric Deegans about Alien, which is set on Earth about 70 years into the future, predating the feature film franchise. Now, here's why I don't have a problem with that. As we all know, if you're an Alien fan, the company, Weyland-Yutani, they knew about the aliens. They knew something was going on. That's why they put Ash on the ship. And Ash, they knew. So there is, from a canonical standpoint, if it takes place before Alien, you have my attention. Right out of the gate, Hawley showed his understanding of the franchise by giving a rather perfect description of what Alien is really about. This, my friends, is where I get excited. Here's what Noah Hawley says. Quote, "The thing with Alien is that it's not just a great monster movie. It's the story of humanity trapped between its primordial, parasitic past and its AI future. And they're both trying to kill us. So there's nowhere to go. It's really a story of, does humanity deserve to survive? Does humanity's arrogance in thinking that we're no longer food, and its arrogance in creating these AI beings who we think will do what we tell them, but ultimately might lose their mind? Is there a way out?" That, to me, sounds like the beginnings of great science fiction. The fact that, I love what he says there. Our humanity's primordial parasitic past and its AI future. And we're caught in the middle. And is there any way out? Now, I don't know what his show is about, but that concept alone, I'm in. That shows a level of thought and a level of just, that's the kind of thing I want. Those questions are what I want to see dealt with in great science fiction. In director Ridley Scott's masterful 1979 original Alien, there's indeed both the titular primordial monster and two sinister AI elements, the murderous android Ash and the ship's persistently unhelpful supercomputer Mother. There's a moment in the second film where Sigourney Weaver says, I don't know which species is worse. You don't see them screwing each other over for a percentage. I think there's something really intriguing about exploring humanity and all its goods and evils, and then trying to recreate for an audience those feelings you had in watching those first 2 films, which isn't easy in a franchise that has had 4 subsequent films and another film coming out soon, Alien Romulus. But I think I have some tricks up my sleeve. Amen. When you hear creators talking this way, when they are coming at it from a philosophical perspective that I find intriguing, well, you've earned my respect. When I hear people talking this way about the first 2 Alien movies, Noah Hawley already had my respect from his past works. But in hearing what he's got in store for us, and admittedly vague, it's just really concepts, but the kinds of concepts he's thinking about is exactly what I think great science fiction does. It'll be commenting on our world today and probably adding a little bit of that cosmic horror, that blind sight horror that I love so much. Again, the novel by Peter Watts. You should all read it. And it should get made into a movie, although it'd be really hard. Although David Fincher could probably do it. I don't know who'd give him the money, but I'd really like to see that movie, and Exopraxis too. But it's what makes me excited about something. I'm stoked, man. This is going to seem crazy. I know I've talked about it, but Cronenberg's new movie, The Shrouds, where people can they can go to cemeteries and watch their loved ones decay in real time through video screens and systems. Cronenberg's one of my favorite directors because of his concepts. Conceptually, his body horror films, I thought Crimes of the Future would be the period, the exclamation point, whatever, on his body horror. Nope. Now he's going to make a movie about the final body horror, the literal destruction of the human body as it decays after death. God bless you, David Cronenberg. Thank you for still making movies, and I'm so glad people are still giving you money because I can't wait to see them. But anyway, excited for this. Deegans, the podcast host, asked Hawley if he's using the backstory provided in Scott's more recent Alien prequel films, 2012's Prometheus and 2017's Alien Covenant, which take place closer in the franchise's timeline to Hawley's own show than those first 2 movies. The films introduced a controversial backstory whereby the aliens were manufactured as a bioweapon by a mysterious race dubbed the Engineers. Noah Hawley says, quote, "Ridley and I have talked about this and many, many elements of the show." Hawley says, "For me and for a lot of people, this perfect life form, as it was described in the first film, is the product of millions of years of evolution that created this creature that may have existed for 1,000,000 years out there in space." God bless you. The idea that on some level it was a bioweapon created half an hour ago, that's just inherently less useful to me. And in terms of the mythology, what's scary about this monster is that when you look at those first 2 movies, you have this retro-futuristic technology. You have giant computer monitors, these weird keyboards. You have to make a choice. Am I doing that? Because in the prequels, really made the technology thousands of years more advanced than the technology of Alien, which is supposed to take place in those movies' future. There's something about that doesn't really compute for me. I prefer the retro-futurism of the first 2 films, and so that's the choice I've made. There's no holograms. The convenience of that beautiful Apple Store technology is not available to me. Hawley's Alien series shut down production in August due to the SAG-AFTRA strike, but is expected to resume filming soon in Thailand. The ensemble cast includes Easy Davis, Alex Lothar, Samuel Blanken, Sidney Chandler, Ardash Gaurav, and Timothy Oliphant, and David Rysdahl. Meanwhile, Fargo Season 5 is airing weekly on Fox and Hulu. So that was the article. Obviously, I have not listened. Oops, I didn't mean to make that go away. I have not listened to the podcast, but I want to. But see, the thing is, what he's saying, especially about the retro-futurism, Denis Villeneuve did the same thing when he made Blade Runner 2049. He looked at Blade Runner and he said, you know what? Now we have all kinds of different technology. It didn't look the way, our technology doesn't look the way they thought it was going to look in 1982. But there's no reason why I can't say that future, the future of Blade Runner, is not our future. So let's stick with the retrofuturism. I mean, my God, when they went to what's the character's name? Why am I drawing a blank on his name? But when they went to, someone's saying it right now. But they had the little, kind of like in Minority Report, those little wooden balls that would come out. I've got the name right on the tip of my tongue. Wallace, Neanderthal Wallace, Jared Leto's character. So they had that retrofuturism, which made the movie cool. They still had flying cars, which we still don't have. So the technology, that retrofuture technology, that's the way to go. It helped the Blade Runner 2049 film feel like it belonged to Blade Runner, even though they were 30 years apart almost. Well, they were 30 years apart because Blade Runner takes place in 2019. So I love this idea, what Noah Hawley's talking about. And the thing is, I believe the way he believed that those aliens were thousands of years, millions of years old, maybe. They were the Lovecraftian, instead of Cthulhu or any of the old gods, they were the aliens were 9 foot tall Cthulhus, each one of them. And that was horrific. And by making them the product of engineering or a bioweapon or David's tinkering, a paranoid android's tinkering, they took away from what was great, what was awesome, what was, dare I say, iconic. And I think we should all be excited for Noah Hawley's Alien TV series. Now, I'm going to reserve my judgment. We haven't seen anything from Fede Alvarez's Alien, Romulus. I've heard it's quite good. Ridley Scott, we've heard Ridley Scott liked it. I don't believe any of that, but I would say that Fede Alvarez has also earned our respect through Evil Dead, through Don't Breathe. Both of those movies are really great pieces of work. Obviously, they're not huge budget studio tentpole properties, but I think that, some people have made the observation that the cast of Alien Romulus is a bunch of multi-ethnic, good-looking people. And one of the things that I loved about the original Alien, and I'm going to say it, peak verisimilitude. The actors that they cast in Alien looked like they were workaday, blue-collar people. They gelled really well together. Right. And I think that's part of the success of the movie. I've been saying kids, younger people, actors are too good-looking in movies, especially in movies like the Alien franchise. But I understand why they go that way. I think, though, that we should hold out our hopes because I think Alien Romulus is going to be good. I think that Noah Hawley's Alien TV series he's saying the exact kind of things that I wanted to hear from him. And maybe, 20th Century Fox, if you think about it. So FX is making the Alien TV series. 20th Century Studios is making Alien Romulus. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, also a Fox-derived film. And if you think about Deadpool 3, that too's Fox. I know they're all owned by it, but isn't it funny? Who would have thought that the most exciting franchise films that are coming out in the next 6 months or whatever, I don't know when the TV series is coming out, are all coming from Fox Studios. But you know why that's not surprising, ultimately? Because the president of Fox Studios is Steve Asbell, who I've come to know a little bit through the Inglorious Trexperts. He's the best studio executive working in Hollywood. He knows his franchises. He knows his science fiction. He's one of us. And when I say one of us, he's not just some dilettante pretending. Oh, his knowledge goes deep. And it's amazing. He's my hope for 2024 and 2025 is that Steve Asbell and 20th Century Studios is unleashed. Because that man is quietly doing the Lord's work. Pray. That was him. They don't know it. I sit there and go, hey, Disney, you got maybe the most, right now, the most creative friendly, the man who knows story, who knows genre. You have the currently best studio head in Hollywood who is going to make you banger after banger after banger after banger. But I don't know if anyone's paying attention. Steve Asbell should not be slept on. That man should be creating franchise properties. Every month there could be a 20th Century Studios movie coming out, and I bet they're all going to make money. They should let him do it. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to say I'm excited. I'm excited about something. I'm excited about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I'm excited about Noah Hawley's Alien. I'm excited about Alien Romulus. And I'm excited about Deadpool 3. And they're all coming from 20th Century Studios. And you know what? I think we should collectively find something that we should all be excited about, because in this crazy election year, and who knows what's going to happen, I think why not get excited about somebody like Noah Hawley making an Alien TV series when he's saying the right things. Now, does that mean he might crash and burn? Sure. But I'd rather be excited about it. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I loved Legion and Fargo. And I'm telling you, those episodes of Fargo, come on, man. Pretty damn good. So let's give it up for Noah Hawley's Alien series. And it doesn't mean it's going to work 100%, but I'd like to think it might. And now, I have letters. That's right, folks. Well, first of all, before I get to the letters, let me check and see if you guys have fired in any super chats, tips, or anything like that. What do you think? What do you have to say? I don't know. So let me see. First of all, Luke Walker has become a member of the channel. Thank you, Luke. This Saturday, we have a member call coming up. For those of you who don't know, bi-weekly. I do member calls on Saturday. They begin at 11 a.m., sometimes at 12, but mostly at 11, and they go on for hours, and we just shoot the shit. Sadhu sends in a super chat and says, I still love Prometheus and Covenant. I can't get enough of David playing God. I want an entire show on that. I definitely played Dead Space on PlayStation 5. Love you, Rob. Thanks, man. Thanks, Sadhu. And you know what? Just saying Sadhu puts a smile on my face. Danny Dank says, why does Noah think his ideas trump Ridley's? Whatever Ridley Scott sets up is the canon. I wish this universe was much more cohesive. Well, Danny, Ridley Scott did not write Alien. If you look into, they were going to make it as a movie that was going to be called Star Beast at one point. And Dan O'Bannon was involved in the writing of Alien. Ridley Scott was a director for hire. And yes, H.R. Giger, I think H.R. Giger is this is not to diminish Ridley Scott's contribution to the franchise, because the man, his vision was revolutionary in making Alien what it was. But in terms of he had help. It wasn't like he was a writer-director that wrote the script, came in, and it was all his vision. No, he was smart to hire H.R. Giger to develop. And remember, Giger's work on that film was also inspired by work he'd already done. He was drawing upon work that he'd already done in the past and brought it into the Alien franchise. And I would dare say that Giger was almost as responsible for the Alien itself as Ridley Scott was. And again, it's not to take away anything from Ridley Scott, but you know what? Ridley Scott didn't create the Alien Queen. The Alien Queen was something that James Cameron brought in and realized, And so I think that the Alien franchise, it's different than, say, Gene Roddenberry creating Star Trek or George Lucas creating Star Wars. And I don't think anyone is saying, look, here's the thing. Alien came out in 1979. Covenant came out in 2012. That's a lot of water under the bridge for any filmmaker. And again, when Ridley Scott was making Prometheus, he had John Spates he was working with, and then of course Damon Lindelof came in and wrote, and that it changed. I mean, he had the idea of that Eric Von Donigan engineers Chariots of the Gods stuff, but the Alien franchise has had many contributors. However, I would say the look of the Alien franchise was all about. And the thing is, Danny, I think also that Noah Hawley explained exactly why he's going back to Alien and Aliens to be the touchstones, because things change. He makes a good point. Why in Prometheus does the retro future of Alien look different in Prometheus when the technology is much more advanced? And I think that he's got a point there. So if Noah Hawley is setting his movie before Alien and Aliens and is going to, here's the thing. the thing about the aliens, if you think about the premise of Alien, and that the Weyland-Yutani Company knew that the aliens existed, they knew the aliens existed before we had Covenant and we had Prometheus. So what Noah Hawley's going to do is he's making his TV series set on Earth about that time. And I think that's okay. I in my own headcanon, I'll make it canonical to Alien and Aliens because I don't consider Prometheus or Covenant canonical. They're different variations on stories, but they don't really fit, and it's a little bit nonsensical. And I think both of those movies diminish the power of Alien and Aliens. Although you could say that Ridley Scott coming back, I don't see the Alien universe the same way I see Star Trek or Star Wars. Ace Hanlon. By the way, I do want to say to Danny Dank that that was his 10th Super Chat on a live stream. So thank you, Danny. I appreciate it. That's very nice. Ace Hanlon, who's been a member for 2 months, he's a PGS hero, says, Alien is my favorite franchise. I hated Alien 3 until I watched the assembly cut. They still did Hicks and Newt dirty, though. They did. Hicks was a badass. Yeah, I thought that was unnecessary. I don't, why'd they do that? Why did they do that to them? Brandon Martin sends in a super chat and says, we often talk about J.J. Abrams' storytelling, so it's ironic that my favorite project he made was Super 8, his only original work. What do you think? Brandon, I don't think it's ironic. I was not a big fan of Super 8. I wanted it to be better than it was. Some of it was great. I thought it was too much of a pastiche of other people's work, obviously heavily influenced by Spielberg. And I'll tell you something. What I really missed is that these kids were wanting to make a movie, and the idea was set up that they would use certain things like a train crash. They would use certain things in their own Super 8 films, but it would have been more fun to me if the movie was called Super 8 and they were carrying their cameras around the whole time, and all of this alien incursion and all the mayhem that happened, they actually were able to get it on film. And at the end of the movie, you would see the movie that they made, but the entire experience they would have captured on film. That's where I thought they were going, and they kind of let me down. But I think the unoriginal nature of it kind of bothered me. But I do think because it's the only thing that he did that was original, I'll give it up for that. A Silly Goose sends in a tip. By the way, the tip link is down in the description. A Silly Goose says, I love Prometheus and Covenant. David is maybe my favorite character in the universe, and I think he's a great villain. I like these movies. I like that they drove into the lore of the Alien universe. I'll take any Alien prequels they give us. Well, A Silly Goose, and again, like with Danny Dank, I will give it up for you guys. I mean, there's no reason. You don't have to agree with me. I just think that I thought that they made the Alien universe less special. The idea that David created basically the alien creatures that we know, or variations on a theme, I didn't like that. I like the idea that those alien creatures, like Noah Hawley said, were the product of millions of years of evolution, that they were those Lovecraftian old one demons that were out there in the cosmos, and they were something that mankind was really not meant to find, and the cosmic horror of the universe. And I thought both Prometheus, I mean, the engineers were interesting, but I don't think the engineers, I never got the sense that they were really particularly thought through their whole civilization. When we finally end up talking to one, it seems kind of silly that if the engineers were seeding planets or whatever, like they were, wouldn't they want their creations to find them? Like, what was the point? Like, why were they doing it? It didn't make a whole lot of sense. I didn't understand. It was not what I was expecting, and I'm glad that A Silly Goose liked that stuff, and same with Ace Hanlon. I wouldn't want to take that away from you guys, but I wanted more. As Kirsten Dunst said in Interview with a Vampire, I want more. A performing artist sends in a super chat and says, when Woody Harrelson confronts Caesar explaining how the virus mutated, taking human intelligence, was the dopest scene in the whole last Ape trilogy. Look, I have to tell you, again, I grew up with Planet of the Apes. All 5 of the original Ape movies. Say it with me now. Planet, Beneath, Escape, Conquest, and Battle for or of the Planet of the Apes from. And I love those films. You know, I love the animated series. I love the live-action TV show. I was a huge Apes fan growing up. And when Rise of the Planet of the Apes was coming out, I'm like, God. But it was fucking good. I like those movies a lot. And I think they work pretty well. I don't think they diminish. I think the original Planet of the Apes is, of course, one of the great science fiction movies ever made. It's a little dated now when people go back and watch it because of the makeups, especially compared to the CGI masterpiece that Rise of the Planet of the Apes was. The apes, and with Andy Serkis and the orangutan, amazing. And the War of the Planet of the Apes it's a little underwhelming, but I still love it. And I agree, the conversation's great, and it's a very respectable trilogy. And I can't wait to see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Great title. I'm glad they went with Of the Planet of the Apes. Why does Disney Plus not have a whole Planet of the Apes section on Disney Plus? Why don't they have a Go Ape button? Using the old classic, there's a one sheet, a Go Ape one sheet. You used to be able to go to theaters and watch all 5 movies when I was a kid. There's got to be a Go Ape button. You have 10 Planet of the Apes movies with Kingdom. You've got the 5 originals. You've got Tim Burton's remake. You've got the 3 that are already out, the trilogy, the new trilogy, the CG trilogy, and you've got Kingdom, and you've got the animated series, and you've got the live action series, and some of the live action series episodes were cut into TV movies as well. Why? Why don't you have that? And why isn't there the 4K version of the original 5 Planet of the Apes movies? Those were always money makers for Fox. Oh, well. So what a bummer. I don't know. These are questions I'm beyond my pay grade. I have letters. If you want to send me a letter, you can postgeeksingularity.com. This first letter comes from Floating Kites. And the subject is The Max Life of Pop Culture. You've spoken on your show about how pop culture has a half-life of 20 years. That's an arbitrary number. That's from my perspective. Overall, I'd agree. But when Mickey Mouse went into the public domain, it got me thinking, what is the maximum life of an IP? And I'd argue for most, it's about 80 years. Mickey Mouse went into the public domain after no one really cared anymore. During the 10s, it was almost like Disney deliberately devalued the brand to the point where it entering public domain didn't matter as much as it would say in 2004 or 2008. There are no children now with an attachment to the old cartoons due to not being rerun. The amount of adults who care, I am one, are more of a vocal minority. The character exists mostly to sell merchandise. As someone who makes art myself, public domain used to terrify me. The idea that one day anyone could make and sell things based on my art scared me because how personal my work is. I feel the current public domain time period is perfect. 96 years is just enough time for everyone who cared about this thing to have moved on to a degree, and it now has more value for its historical significance, so it should be available to be used by anyone. If someone in 150 years is reading up on my work and decides that they want to revive it, then I commend them, and I hope it succeeds. Besides, I'll be too dead to care. Certain characters like Batman, Spider-Man, Sherlock Holmes will be relevant as long as art is made. But think of a series like Popeye, Flash Gordon, Archie, series that went on decades and managed to stay relevant that slowly lost all relevance around the 80-year mark. There are still fans of all of these even now, me, and I understand some stories never die. We're still reading grim fairy tales, Grimm's Fables, hundreds of years later. But I'm coming to the realization 8 decades is usually enough time for something to lose all relevance to a modern audience, even if it attempted to be revamped. Stories are a reflection of people's experience in a different place in time. The hopes and dreams of people who could long be gone by the time I experience it, but still can capture the identity of that period, and it helps me understand what was important to them. While Mickey Mouse showed us very clearly that for most IPs, eventually everyone stops caring, no matter how massive you were at one point, in a way, it's liberating to me to know one day that new stories and ideas come. People as a whole, their interests change, and even the biggest thing in the world eventually becomes a footnote in history. It reminds me to live to the fullest and enjoy the art I watch and make it even deeper, because I know one day it won't matter to anyone, but it did while I was here, and that's all you can ask for. Wow, what a great letter, Floating Kiss. This was amazing. You know why? This is why I like doing this YouTube show. Sometimes I get frustrated, or I'm like, God, I've been telling people I have nothing more to say. Maybe that's why I maybe lean more into the political, which I don't know enough about. And people are always dinging me, like, although I didn't know how many Marxists there really were out there. But anyway, yeah, this is a great letter. And Floating Kiss, you've now I have a new obsession. How long? What is the maximum range? So, what Floating Kiss was saying was an extrapolation on what I've always been saying, is that pop culture has a half-life of, I think, 20 years. And every 20 years, it gets half as relevant as it used to be until people don't know about it anymore. And I've seen this even amongst genre fans. I mean, when I was a kid, one of my favorite TV shows was Jerry Anderson's first live-action series, UFO. UFO ran 26 episodes, and I love that show. Now, because of merchandise and the people who've seen it, they've kept it alive. It's come out on home video. You can see it. But how many people out there watching right now, show of hands, know what UFO is, or were affected by it in any way, shape, or form, or know what shadow is, or what interceptors are, or the sound of spinning UFOs, or who Ed Straker is? Who knows what confetti check, AOK, and a question of priorities are? Well, the answer isn't, I will think nothing less of you if you've never heard of UFO. UFO was a series that was made from 1969 to 1971, and it's not well known in the States. And so there's no shame in not knowing what it is. But I would say that, and that's just one thing, there's all kinds of movies from that time. Jerry Anderson, who made UFO, also made a science fiction movie I loved when I was a kid called Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, a.k.a. Doppelganger, that I used to see on TV a lot. And it has a lot of the people that were in UFO and was made by the same people who made UFO. And I like that movie. But how many people know it? It's basically, unless you're a real diehard science fiction media fan, nobody cares. The TV movie that Jerry Anderson made, Into Infinity, a.k.a. The Day After Tomorrow, that was a really big deal. It was an educational science fiction show about a family that ends up going through a black hole. How many people have seen that? I grew up with it. It was a big deal for me, but that's because I grew up at a specific time in the 1970s, and saw things when I was a little kid that left an indelible impression. But the thing is, every year that ticks by, those things become less and less relevant because they never moved forward. They were never something that kids from the 80s or 90s or aughts, unless you discovered it via reading about it or something, or maybe saw something about it on YouTube. And even then, it would still be something you just saw on YouTube. It wouldn't be something that you sat down and watched and you would have taken the whole thing into your brain. So I've always believed that pop culture has a half-life of 20 years. And, I think when these things make their biggest impression is when you're a kid. For me, I started 5. I started watching Star Trek and science fiction movies and everything. Maybe I did it at 4, but when I was 5 years old are when my real distinct memories of loving these things began. And they're still happening now, but between the time I was 5 to 25, my mind was soaking all this stuff up like a sponge, and I was reading everything I could about this. So for those 20 years, it was indelibly burned into my brain, and I've carried those things with me, and I still love them even 30 years on. But it's really something that shapes you when you're a kid, And variations of those interests will stay with you your whole life. But that's why I've thought that between 5 and 25, that's when it catches hold of you. And then you kind of stick those things that you got in that time frame. You stick with those things and you take them with you. And then the rest sort of gets left behind. But I think every person between the ages of 5 and 25 are influenced by their own pop culture. And that's what's great about pop culture. It's constantly in flux. It changes for everybody depending where you're at. I mean, that's why I love meeting people who are in their early 20s or early 30s and early 40s and listen to what they've been influenced by. Because it changes. Movies are not the force that they were when I was a kid. They're different. I've said that movies themselves are and I believe this, are the art form of the 20th century. Now, we still love movies, but they're certainly not the cultural force that they were in the 20th century because they were the end-all be-all. Now we have there's different kinds of things. Social media didn't exist. So kids are growing up much more influenced by social media than they are, or video games, than they are from movies. People like movies, but they're not mad for movies the way we were when we were younger, just because there's more choices. There's things that didn't exist. Video games were cool, but they were incredibly primitive. So they weren't capturing, look, even I, as an old man, I'll sit there and go, Ghost of Tsushima fucking rocks. I mean, I love, or Red Dead Redemption, or, I love all the Grand Theft Auto games. I mean, it's funny to me, I played Grand Theft Auto 5 when it first came out and beat the story mode in a couple of days, really, those 3 characters. And then when it went online, I don't have the time or inclination to become as good as those kids. Some 11-year-old kid was smoking my ass when I was trying to play the online component in Grand Theft Auto 5. So I tuned out. I'm too old to play online because, I tried to play Fortnite. So frustrating. I mean, I'd get killed within minutes. So I would never even have time to get good. But what are you going to do? Yeah. So it changes. But the idea of how long can pop culture last, I think you're right. 96 years, because everybody, for the most part, that it affected will be gone. That allows an older generation or a newer generation to take older things and renovate them if they want. And anybody who had any financial stake, I mean, I'm sure that the families would like to hang on to their copyrights, but I think that a century is probably good enough. Why not? They generated lots of income. And by the way, things change. I mean, Tarzan the Ape Man, a great Blu-ray was just released from Warner Archive of the original Tarzan the Ape Man with Johnny Weissmuller as Tarzan. But, Disney made Tarzan relevant again for a little while. And of course, they keep trying to make Tarzan movies. We had Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes with our own Highlander, Christopher Lambert. How many people have seen that? Raise your hands. How many of you have seen Hugh Hudson's Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, that came out in 1984? I mean, I can't see how many people are raising their hands right now, but I would imagine some people might. But it's not a movie that's really known. It wasn't a great movie. I thought it was good, but people don't know much about it. How many people have seen 1976's King Kong with Jeff Bridges? That's right, Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange and Charles Grodin, who worked for Petrox. How many people have seen that? I mean, it's kind of been supplanted by Peter Jackson's King Kong or the original. People don't go back and, marvel at Dino De Laurentiis' Kong. When my Kong would die, everybody cry. How many people do that? I don't know. How many people do? Do people even know it exists? I like that movie. Mostly because you couldn't resist the posters. Kong straddling across the World Trade Center with that John Berkey painting, and he's pulling jet fighters out of the sky that weren't in the movie. Didn't matter. It was still cool. But same thing. Logan's Run, big favorite of mine. How many people have seen Logan's Run? 1976, big movie. A lot of the 70s sci-fi. Some people have seen it, whether it's the Omega Man or Soylent Green or Rollerball or A Boy and His Dog or No Blade of Grass or The Ultimate Warrior or Death Race 2000, Zardoz. How many people have seen those movies? When I was growing up, I had to see all of them. But how many people, I have seen all of them. I own a lot of them. How many people even know that they're there? How many people know what the final program is? Jerry Cornelius, Michael Moorcock's books. You know, these were big deals when I was a kid. Nobody knows about them now. So Floating Kites, what a great letter. I think you're right, though. 100 years. The max that an IP lasts, 100 years. Yeah, someone's going to write in and go, they can last longer. There's always exceptions to the rule, but I like that. 100 years. Good letter. Rod Tolles writes in and says, show suggestion. Hi, Rob. First, I love your show. Why, thank you. I would love to see a show where you do a list of the 100 things you hate about Star Trek 09, Star Trek Into Darkness, and Star Trek Beyond. To be honest, Rod, I don't even know if I could survive doing such a list. That would be awesome. I grew up with TOS, and I love everything that came before the 2009 movie. I also hate, sad to say, modern Star Trek. It's trash. Parked in the same shuttle bay, Rod Tolles. Well, Rod, you and I are parked. We park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. But, you know, I'll tell you something. The impulse to continue, and this, you know, it's funny that these letters came in because the impulse to continue IP to make money is really great. Here's one of the funny things about Star Trek Discovery and Strange New Worlds. I feel that they are appealing to certain people on a certain level, but they're not appealing to people on the kind of level that's going to make them more relevant as the years go by. I think Discovery and its identity politics has already made it horribly dated, and it'll be 7 years old this year, but it's certainly not very relevant to our times. You know, dealing with very superficial issues and not telling stories that can be relatively timeless is problematic. And I think that my biggest problem with modern Star Trek is it's not really about the human experience of today. Oh, sure, it's addressing identity politics and the overt hot button issues of today, but it's not really offering any kind of real examination of our world and giving us stuff to think about. It's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. And I don't think it works. And I think that's problematic. So, but I want to thank you for writing in. It's Star Trek light. And that's the problem, I think, that the show has. Undead Sick, our friend from Holland, writes in. Undead Sick. His subject here is just Star Wars, or their subject. Their subject is Star Wars. Well, Rob, the day has come where I'm going into a debate with you about Star Wars again because I have seen the latest Midnight Musings and I just had to react to your comments on the latest news that we got. So here goes. On Midnight Musings, you asked the question, why is The Mandalorian written like a Saturday morning cartoon? To which I would like to reply, because at its core, that's what Star Wars has been for years to me, and it's how George Lucas originally conceived it to begin with. And somehow, we have lost that along the way. Please tell me exactly what is wrong with Din Djarin and Grogu going off on a fun, Western-style adventure together. And the question you asked about who and how many people or droids built Star Killer Base, who cares? It was built, and that's it. No one ever asked that question about the Death Star before Andor came out, and it's why I like Frank Miller's comment about the tires of the Batmobile so much. You never, ever overcomplicate things. The same goes for characters like Dedra and Cyril. Okay, so now we're supposed to have sympathy for the Empire? It reminds me of the quote The Rise of Skywalker used in Choose a Side. That to me is a slippery slope because choose a side implies you can be a Sith on purpose. And growing up, I already knew the Sith were bad because they were modeled after Nazis. But, well, were they? The Sith weren't necessarily Nazis. But just because we have Nazis in real life doesn't mean we should have them be acceptable. Comments like that allow for the fandom to say, I am a Sith, and we should all want to be Jedi. The reason why we loved to hate characters like Tarkin, Palpatine, and Krennic was because they were more mustache-twirling villains that don't have a human side to them. And that is Star Wars' core problem today. By making those statements, they tell me as an audience member that I'm a dumb idiot who can't figure out stuff for himself. As an example, let's say I own a burger joint and my customers give me high ratings because I make killer burgers and I have a stacked dinner every day of the week. But then one day out of the blue, I decide to change the menu. Instead of burgers, I start selling bacon-wrapped filet mignon. That's a bad example because I would love that. Okay, people might like that, but it's not a burger. It's not what I sell or represent, and it will lead my customers to going to a different diner for their burgers because that's why they came to my place, but they can't get the thing I advertised. The fact that we now have to pretend that Star Wars is anything more than escapist fun to watch space fantasy is beyond me. Pardon me, Star Wars is anything more than escapist fun to watch space fantasy is beyond me. I will leave these thoughts with you. Greetings from Holland, Undead Sick. Whoo boy, okay. Here's the thing. You can have escapist fare, but that escapist fare can be really, really good. And if you look to the original Star Wars trilogy, and I'll just look at Star Wars and Empire, you can't tell me that The Empire Strikes Back is a Saturday morning cartoon. You know, I mean, it brings up... Here's the thing. The Adventures of Robin Hood, like Errol Flynn, or you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, or, you know, take your pick. You watch Escapist, War of the Worlds, or Forbidden Planet. There's no reason why escapist fantasy or science fiction or horror can't also be great. See, there's a difference between being a Saturday morning cartoon and being a Saturday morning serial, for instance. I don't mean cereal you eat, like a cereal like The Adventures of Captain Marvel. You can still have a serial work on certain levels. A cartoon is specifically designed for children. I mean, a Saturday morning cartoon is, not all animation is. A Saturday morning cartoon is specifically geared toward appealing to children. Star Wars was designed to appeal to the child in all of us. And the thing is, you can make escapist fantasy fare that is also just as appealing to adults as it is to children. And the thing is, those are movies, and by the way, the original Star Wars and Empire did just that. I think Return of the Jedi was a big slide down in quality because it was directed more toward children. And that, I think, was a mistake. And I understand, because George Lucas, like you said, George Lucas didn't necessarily originally want to direct things only toward kids. I mean, maybe ultimately he did, because I think that's kind of where he wound up. But Star Wars and Empire certainly weren't conceived that way. Irvin Kershner didn't think he was making a Saturday morning cartoon when he was directing Empire. He was trying to make space fantasy, escapist space fantasy for everybody, for a 4-quadrant movie. And the thing is, making a Saturday morning cartoon, the insinuation is that it doesn't have to be sophisticated, it doesn't have to be good, it doesn't have to be a lot of things. And I reject that notion. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think Empire Strikes Back works if you're a kid, and if you're an adult, it has things to say to you as well, especially Luke's training. You know, kids might not get everything that's going on with that training sequence when Luke is on Dagobah training with Yoda, but they get it. You know, if you want to go for the look at me, judge me by my size, do you? But when he's going into the cave and he asks what's in the cave and Yoda says only what you take with you. Kids might understand that, but I think it has more resonance for adults. You know, the fact that when Han Solo goes out into the ice to find his friend Luke who's been lost and ends up, they have to close the shield doors and he stays out there. I mean, these kinds of sacrifices also appeal to adults, and that's why I think Star Wars works. And Lucas and Spielberg really knew how to do that. You know, I've been reading all these hot takes about Close Encounters now. Close Encounters isn't a good movie. And I'm like, that's easy to say when you've lived in a world where Close Encounters always existed. But if you were in the 1977 movie-going audience and saw that film, it was a revelation. And that goes back to pop culture having different meanings for different generations. And I don't expect people to like the movies I like when I was a kid today. I mean, I would say there's a level of sophistication in audiences today that we didn't have. We weren't as sophisticated. We just didn't know as much when we were kids. I think that we had sometimes, in some cases, a better grasp on who we are. You know, we weren't contemplating the meanings of our existence as much. We weren't as navel gazing. Now everyone's looking at themselves because entertainment's made us look at ourselves. Look what I'm doing now. I'm broadcasting on YouTube, talking. You know, we didn't have that when I was a kid. There was never even an example. Like the idea that anybody could even be an influencer was something, you know, you could be an influencer among your friends, all 3 or 4 of them when you're going to go play on Saturday afternoon somewhere. But it's a different world. So, and I find that really interesting that when I was a kid, here's something that's completely changed. Well, not entirely, but kind of. When I was a kid, I never thought, and I've talked about this before, but in the wake of Star Wars, there was a lot of books about science fiction, fantasy, and horror films that came out. And there was one book by Alan Frank called Sci-Fi Now. And I remember, I think it came out in 78, and I've talked about this a lot, but I got that book, and it was a pictorial history, but it had a lot of text in it too of the science fiction film, of the fantasy film. It talked about horror movies, fantasy films, not just space movies. But my attitude was that I want to see every single movie mentioned in this book. Every one. And I knew when I was going to be watching George Méliès's Trip to the Moon. I was going to be watching Metropolis, Nosferatu, you know, silent films from the 20s. I knew that I was going to watch Things to Come, you know, and 30s science fiction. And I knew that they were going to be black and white, the Universal Classic Monster movies. It never occurred to me not to watch something because it was in black and white. When you were a fan, when I was growing up, you wanted to see everything. And it was possible. There was a lot less stuff to see, so it was possible. And it was like, you know, you'd sit down and we'd watch everything, anything to do with science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I would watch it. And I did not care if it was old. I didn't care if it was silent. I didn't care if the special effects were cheesy. I didn't care because it was all part of the continuum. I needed to see it all. I needed to know it all. I needed to understand it all. And that's gone. That's gone. There's this attitude now. And by the way, most of you could count the big science fiction classics and the big horror classics on each. There's probably 10 great horror films, 10 great science fiction movies, and 10 great fantasy movies. And they were all on the same list. If you ask people in 1975 to name the 10 greatest science fiction movies, they'd all say the same shit. They would all put Metropolis on there. They'd put Day the Earth Stood Still on there. They'd put Forbidden Planet on there. They'd put Planet of the Apes in 2001 on there. You know, it'd be all the same movies because there weren't that many of them that were considered truly great. There was a lot of disposable beef fare amongst them. You know, maybe somebody might throw on them. You'd get a Planet of the Apes because there was very few highbrow big studio pictures that were respectable science fiction movies. But, you know, maybe Rocket Ship XM, stuff like that. But it's a different time. Now, a lot of what are considered classic movies, you know, the most classic genre film, science fiction, fantasy, and horror, we've all grown up and become geeks now. So everybody loves science fiction, fantasy, and horror, everybody. But you have whole audiences that are genre film fans, and they are being told because they grew up in a world where something like Close Encounters already existed with its reputation looming large. So when you go back and look at it, you expect Close Encounters to be as effective as something like, I don't know, The Matrix. And it's just not, you know, and when it came out, it's hard to explain to people that Star Wars and Close Encounters, which came out basically within 6 months of each other, revolutionized special effects in cinema, changed everything. And no one had seen anything like it. I mean, you can't imagine what it was like to see Close Encounters in 70 millimeter with a great high-end and low-end sound system where you had the bass when the mothership shows up. I mean, all that stuff, it's hard to explain because it hadn't existed before. So if you weren't there, you didn't get your mind blown. When you go back and you watch it on video or something, you'll never feel the power of it all. And that's not a bad thing. It's just the reality of it. So it's a different world now. But in terms of Star Wars, I mean, I want great storytelling. I think that the writing itself in things like The Mandalorian, even if I was 10 years old, I would have hated most of the Book of Boba Fett. I'm like, even then I would have said, what is this shit I'm watching? Because it didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel like this is not what Boba Fett would act like. It's not even the Boba Fett we saw in season 2 of The Mandalorian. It's like, who is this guy? He's chasing a droid around a kitchen, and when he finally gets the droid, he holds him up by the neck and says, I am Boba Fett. Like, what? I mean, it's not that it's for kids, it's that it's bad. It's bad writing. And that's what people are responding to. And I will argue that point. Because you can have great children's entertainment, and you can also have bad children's entertainment. And I think that modern Star Wars, it lives and dies by its writing. I mean, I really believe that. But as always, Undead Sick, you're a vibrant part of this channel. It's always good to hear from you. So let's see. There's a lot of people here writing in things, and let's jump into that before another letter. Julian Mushkin, our friend Julian Mushkin, says, Yo, Rob, currently reading Vanguard Summon the Thunder. Love the TOS verisimilitude, even down to wearing the correct early versions of the green wraparound when Anish Katami is made captain of the USS Endeavor. Julian, so what Julian is talking about, there is a series of novels that was written by multiple authors set in the original series era called the Vanguard series. It's really, really good. And it's, there's a lot more canonical fealty to the original series and to the rest of Star Trek than you'll ever find in Discovery or Strange New Worlds. And it's a great book series. And if you were interested in reading an original Star Trek novel series, it has appearances from familiar characters, but it's mostly original. It's a tremendous series. The Star Trek Vanguard series is definitely worth picking up. Our friend 1001 Johnny sends in a super chat. Thank you for that. Destiny Captain sends in a tip and says, Rob, sorry, I got here late. What are your thoughts about the upcoming Alien and Star Trek crossover? I'll admit Romulans are a curious choice, but I guess it could be good. Do you think it will be original Trek Romulans, Kelvin Romulans, or Disco Rommies? Well, I would imagine. So IDW, over the years, there has been many Star Trek crossovers. I quite like the Star Trek X-Men crossovers. There was a comic and there was a novel. They've done crossovers with Planet of the Apes, crossovers with Legion of Superheroes. They've done all kinds of Star Trek crossovers, and they're an interesting diversion. I did not know that they were going to do an Alien Star Trek crossover, but that makes sense. Hey, as long as it's good, I mean, it'd be interesting to see how they deal with those issues, and if the Romulans are part of that too. I mean, hey, as long as it's good, Destiny Captain, I'll read it. I won't buy the flippers. I'll buy the collected version. Hopefully it'll be in a hardcover. Our friend Scott Bartholomew says, Land of the Lost was badass viewing on Saturday mornings growing up. Yeah. Scott, that's a pretty good example. So Land of the Lost, for those of you who don't know, there was a movie, a comedy movie made with Will Ferrell, but the original Saturday morning TV show was Sid Marty Krofft. Had a great theme song. Marshall, Will, and Hawley on a routine expedition. The greatest earthquake ever known. So it was about a family that got plunged into the center of the earth. But there were a lot of people like David Gerald and Dorothy Fontana that wrote for the original Star Trek who wrote for that show. And it didn't just have this family running away from dinosaurs. It had crazy shit. Like it had this lost city where the Sleestaks lived. There was Enoch, the Sleestak from the future. There was all this weird technology and time vortexes and crazy shit. And it was a kid's show, and it looked rather primitive, but the writing was intriguing. It was fascinating to watch that show, and it was, like you said, Scott, it was badass because it never talked down to kids. It was always really intriguing. Scott Bartholomew also said Capricorn 1 was badass, another movie from 1977. Peter Hyams' Capricorn 1 that leaned into the we didn't go to the moon, it was faked. It's a great conspiracy movie. I really like it. Hal Holbrook is in it. O.J. Simpson's in it. James Brolin, Sam Waterston. I mean, I love Capricorn 1. It has a banging Jerry Goldsmith score, too. That's a movie that not a lot of people have seen. Capricorn 1. Elliot Gould. Karen Black. Capricorn 1 is great. I saw that in a theater in 70mm. It was so awesome. Loved it. And again, Capricorn 1 has one of the great theme songs, main title tracks, one of Jerry Goldsmith's best main titles. Joe Panora says, after seeing Highlander, I went on a Christopher Lambert kick. Fortress, Greystoke, Mean Guns, all of them. Mean Guns is coming out on brand new. I think it's coming out in 4K, maybe just Blu-ray. But yeah, Fortress is great. So that's good. I like that. You know, here's a it's a shameless ripoff of Seven. And it stars Leland Orser and Christopher Lambert as cops. And why am I drawing a blank on... Oh, it's called Resurrection. It's a total Seven ripoff, but I like it. I like it. I have the German media book for that. Dieter got it for me. Let's see. This is a tough one. Harikishan Paranjam. You know what? I just destroyed your name, and I apologize. Can I just call you HP? Hello, HP. How you doing? But that's a great name. Harik Rishnan. It's one word. But anyway, I'm sorry I've butchered your name. And thank you for the $20 super chat. I've now butchered your name, and you sent me a $20 super chat. So look at the asshole that I am. I apologize. But your comment. Hi, Rob. Longtime viewer of your content. I totally agree with your views on the current state of the industry. It's a nice validation to have someone talk about reading literature, which is the bedrock for storytelling. Well, thank you for saying so, especially genre literature. I find it fascinating that, and part of the reason I like what Noah Hawley was saying about the fact that on one hand, humanity has its parasitic past, and then we have our AI future, is that he's speaking in literary terms. He's speaking in the kind of terms that science fiction and horror have been dealing with since their inception as genres. And a lot of the time, I feel that we are not getting, especially in the science fiction realm, there's so much interesting stuff going on in literary science fiction. And I feel that so many creators of other things like media are missing out because there's so many amazing stories. I mean, I always throw out Blindsight, but and that's a rough. It can be rough for people. It's pretty dense, but just a great science fiction, a breezy science fiction novel like Project Hail Mary. If you just want to have fun, Project Hail Mary, written by Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. If you know Project Hail Mary, you know. If you don't know anything about Project Hail Mary, I recommend that book wholeheartedly because it is so much fun. They're supposed to make a movie version of it, but here's the thing. If you don't know what Project Hail Mary is, don't read anything about it. Just take my word, and whether it's you get it on Kindle or however you get it, I guarantee you, I was 15 pages in that book, and it was like crack cocaine. I was enjoying it so much. I literally sat at my kitchen table, or the kitchen island where we have like bar stools. I sat down. I started that book. I did not get up. Well, maybe I got up once to go to the bathroom or something. I read the entire book sitting in the kitchen. I was there for like 3-4 hours, and Elizabeth's like, "Are you going to get up? Are you moving?" I'm like, No. And I read the entire book sitting at the kitchen table. It's so good. Scott Bartholomew says Andor was nominated for a couple of Emmys tonight, but not Picard season 3. Yeah, I understand that. You know, there's a prejudice against, and also Star Trek's been around so long. Star Trek never got the love it deserved, but I think Andor was richly deserving of nominations. Tack sends in a tip and says, glad you enjoyed the letter about the maximum life of pop culture. I did. When I submitted it to your website, my phone auto-filled my YouTube name, it's Floating Kites, not Floating Kisses, Floating Kites. And I didn't notice because it was midnight. Your response was eloquent and thought out as expected. Well, it wasn't that thought out because I just read your letter for the first time on the show. But I really like the idea of it. See, that's what's so much fun doing this show, is being able to interact with everybody. Really, really good. Destiny Captain says, Rob, that was a joke about the stupid alien Romulus project. I get where the name comes from, and it would be an okay title if another 50-year franchise hasn't already used the term and embedded it in pop culture. Yeah, I know. I know, right? Maybe it won't be called that. Who knows? So yes, I don't disagree with you. Let's see. I think I'm caught up. I'm just looking. Joe Panora has been a member of the channel for 10 months. So thank you for that. Thanks for that, Joe. I'm going to read another letter. You guys see these letters, man. You guys are, I'm telling you, this is interesting. So Just Thoughts writes in, building on ideas is not plagiarism. Oh, some will not agree. But here's the question. Cases involving intellectual properties, some notable cases here, including the case which involves James Cameron and the Terminator lawsuit, in which James Cameron lost over images or ideas from another property, a property belonging to Harlan Ellison. While others would say that he stole the idea, I think otherwise. For even Stephen King said it best himself. If you want to be a writer, then read, to get the grasp of an idea or to generate new ideas. But notice I did not say plagiarism, for plagiarism is stealing another's work. Building on other ideas is not plagiarism, but by building an entirely new world with your own story and around that idea. For there is a thin red line that runs through it. Would we have gotten the Terminator movie, or hell, even other vampire movies, if the Nosferatu lawsuit from the earlier part of the century had the estate of Nosferatu winning? Every movie, every book nowadays, aside from a few works, is in fact an idea generated from another idea, with the only exceptions being nonfiction. But some could be questionable, or what was the early writers of yesterday that wrote about events from the very lives in which they lived. But I will say, if a good portion of one's story is centered towards another's idea, and not just with it being the thought, then the writers should be credited for that idea. But Rob, what do you say on this? Well, Just Thoughts, that's interesting. Here's the thing. When it comes to television and movies, it's kind of a slippery slope because it's product and it's intellectual property that's owned by companies and corporations. And the thing about Terminator, so Harlan Ellison famously went after James Cameron because James Cameron's ideas about Terminator, a soldier from the future coming to the present, and certain elements. There were Outer Limits episodes, Demon with a Glass Hand and Soldier, I think it was, Demon with a Glass Hand and Soldier. Very similar elements. And you can't deny, upon comparison, that they were very similar. And so Harlan Ellison went after him. Now, here's the thing. James Cameron, like our letter writer was saying, we're all influenced by other things. Look at Quentin Tarantino. Some people said that Reservoir Dogs was kind of almost an exact lift of Ringo Lam's, City on Fire? The thing is, for me, Quentin Tarantino's taking all of these things and making genre pastiches with them. and he's borrowing, but he's knowingly borrowing from things, but he's doing something different with them. In the case of the Terminator, I think the ideas were similar, but also the execution was in a way similar. Was he copying it directly? Was he cribbing? I don't think so. I think he was inspired by, but because you're now in a lawsuit and studios are involved and other people are involved, you have to settle. And I think that it's a slippery slope. I think artists borrow or artists steal all the time. But if you're cribbing the exact same beats and the same parts of the story, and you're not doing enough to differentiate your own work from what's going on, there's a case that you can make, that can be made there. I mean, now we're seeing things like the former president of Harvard. The idea was that somebody was cribbing actual passages from other people's research and not attributing, especially in academic circles. I think we see a lot of that now. That's bad. You know, if you want to use somebody's research or whatever, by all means, but attribute the work to them. That's all you have to do. Problem solved. I think people in a way might not even know they're doing it. You know, and it's hard in our society. But I think plagiarism. Look, it depends how you're going to building on my work. If you're a William Marshall fan, it's a slippery slope. And I'll tell you something. Everyone knows if they're doing it. I don't think there's anybody in the world that doesn't know whether they're cribbing or not. We all know. Now, you might want to be deluded, and pretend you're not doing it, but we all know. We know. And when it comes down, like, look, the idea of aliens and flying saucers coming down to Earth, it's been done to death. But that idea is not. That's a big general idea. Somebody being threatened by a shark is a big deal, you know, and it's an idea you can extrapolate from. But if there's a city cop who's moved to an island and becomes the chief of police on that island, that ends up having a shark threatening their entire summer season, and is scared of the water and has a family to protect, and teams up with an oceanographer and a whale hunter or a shark hunter. And these three men go out and set out to sea to kill this large great white shark. Well, that's a story. Now, if you were going to repeat that story and say, keep the story exactly the same, but make the characters women, you know, that would be grounds, I think, for a lawsuit, unless you change it up. And make enough of the story elements different. That's why Deep Blue Sea, nobody watches Deep Blue Sea and thinks, oh, that's just another killer shark movie. It's a Jaws ripoff. Well, it might be a Megalodon. You know, is that a ripoff of Jaws? No, it's a monster movie, but we can tell the difference. I don't think anybody would think that Meg is a ripoff. But there's other shark movies, like there's Tintorera. You know, because when something is successful, there's all these different ripoffs that are variations on a theme, and everyone can tell. I don't think Tintorera or any of the other killer shark movies or Orca in the wake of Jaws, people would say that that's plagiarized. But yeah, it's interesting. I think your point's well taken, but I think we can recognize plagiarism. And I think the people that are committing it also know that they're doing it. They know it. They know that they're doing it. The Wolfram Hart 79. I like that. That's a great reference. Wolfram Hart. I miss Angel. I miss Buffy. Where's the Buffy reunion movie? I mean, I know Joss Whedon's fallen from favor and all that, but who wouldn't want to see... Where's Buffy the Vampire Slayer now? Where is she? Where's Spike? Where's Angel? I would like to see they should make they made a Veronica Mars movie that was crowdfunded. It was theatrically released too. And then they made a new series. I like the new Veronica Mars series. Why not make a new Buffy series? Come on, if X-Files can come back, Just make it better than X-Files. Please, I beg of you. I beg of you. So let's see. This is an interesting letter. This letter comes from Caleb, and the subject is, where did the great creators go? Are they being repressed? Do they merely not exist anymore? Or do they exist and have the freedom but don't have the will? Ooh, this should be interesting. I haven't read this. Let me take a sip of water. Rob, you recently read something on your podcast and on the Midnight Musings concerning a change in movie making away from business moguls dedicated to pleasing viewers to studios following trends. It's true. It got me thinking. I've heard it said that the most underappreciated aspects of business, even by the best economists, is the seeming creation of value out of nothing. We take for granted the knowledge of the products of creation, not considering the fact that they are the result of original thinking. No one knew they needed an iPhone until Steve Jobs conceived of it and led its construction as a mass-market product. It even often takes people years to realize the value of such things. Any landline truthers left? Landline truthers. Well, remember, if there's some great cataclysm and the networks go down, the landlines will still work. The marketing and engineering of things are often applauded, but the conception is rarely given its due, despite requiring by far more creativity and genius of the whole process. Worse yet, it seems like our cultural elites are aimed at outright denying it. We even had a president do this explicitly. Remember Obama's "you didn't build that" speech? I bring this up because it seems like a lack of great cinema, like a lack of industrial innovation and growth, can only result from a lack of creative geniuses. On the question of why, assuming there is such a lack, I can only think of a few reasons. One is that such people are but being forcefully prevented from pulling new ideas into action, government regulation. Then that would be one. I don't think it's a coincidence that Bill Gates headquartered Microsoft in Seattle and that Silicon Valley popped up in the Bay Area, both as far away from Washington, D.C. as you can get. But Hollywood is right there as well. Another explanation is that people have gotten less intelligent, American schools, and the pool of possible creators has shrunk. Maybe, but given the ingenuity seen in other industries apart from Hollywood, AI, oil and gas, etc., I don't think it suffices. A third possibility is far sadder, that artistic creators have lost their will or simply have nothing worth saying. Given that the overriding spirit of today's American university humanities departments is pessimism and self-denial, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the case. I don't know about the areas where good storytelling does still exist. I've heard the video game industry is doing well in this regard. But most film writers have to trod through 4 years of that bleak nonsense. It's also interesting to compare Hollywood to the other arts. I personally think it somehow escaped the nihilism seen in others, Steven Spielberg versus Jackson Pollock, so that last reason may not hold. I'm totally ignorant of the structure of Hollywood, but I strongly suspect things like the guild system are damning of the best minds. Yet good movies still get made. So I'm curious of your opinion of it all, given your knowledge, experience, and insightful wisdom. I love what you're doing. Caleb. Caleb, this was a great letter. See, that's why I love doing this channel. You guys never let me down. Really, really interesting idea and question. Well, here's the thing. Making things is hard, and it requires a certain focus and a certain dedication that I think, one, is much more difficult to muster in this day and age because there's so many interesting things distracting us. now saying it's social media, the tell-all of social media is wrong, because I would say this. There's an incredible amount of creativity that's going on social media, on videos, TikToks, Instagram Reels. There's a lot of really interesting creativity. You know, I like, there's dancing videos. There's these two guys, I forget it. It's just two guys and they dance in a bunch of different places. And it's just a straight on shot showing people dance. And what's really interesting about that is that's what Fred Astaire used to do. It was full body shots, no edits. So you can really appreciate how good of the dancing is. And the thing is, you can sit and scroll through. I have no problem sitting down for 2 hours late night and scrolling through Instagram Reels. I find that incredibly, for the most part, whether I'm listening to Joe Rogan clips or watching dance videos or watching cat videos, it's all one. It's all just this ongoing stream of stuff that people have decided to put out in the world. Now, I'm obsessed over the fact that you can do that for 2 hours, or you can watch a movie that took 5 years to make and cost $200,000 or $200 million. Same 2 hour period of time, but one is a bunch of self-generated reels by people using the platform all over the world, and the other is this big planned extravaganza that took hundreds of people to make, but it's the same 2 hour period of time. What's more valid? I would say both, in a way, as much as I am loath to admit this. If entertainment is your desire, then I think we have now entertainment happening and people making entertainment en masse. I mean, I don't even know what the statistics are about how many videos people are uploading, how many people are on YouTube. We now have, I watch a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of creators, all different kinds of YouTube videos, and everybody's making them. And I'm thinking, my God, there's less and less people interested in movies, because movies are, one, incredibly expensive still to make. Two, they require a small army of people to make effectively. And three, if you've made the best movie in the world, how are people going to see it? It's next to impossible to get it into a theater, because even if you get it into a theater, you need to spend millions of dollars marketing it so people even know that it exists. However, the flip side of that is you have all these amazing creators, millions of creators around the world in all countries, and people of all shapes, size, colors, creeds, belief systems, sexualities, identities, whatever. They can turn on their cameras and they can make content. Now, are there geniuses amongst them? Certainly, I'm sure there are. But 25 years ago, we had none of this. And in 25 years, and I look, as much as I love cinema, it's my favorite art form. As much as I've said, movies were the art form of the 20th century. We live in the post-cinema age. Movies will never matter to culture as much as they did in the latter half of the 20th century. Actually in all of the 20th century, because during wartime as well, World War II and things like that, movies will never matter ever as much as they mattered in the 20th century. And that's okay, because we have different forms that have supplanted them. Video games. And I really believe that video games, when you combine them with AI and what's coming down the pike, the level of, we're all going to be able to play AR games and holodeck games. And I think video games are where movies were in the 20s, where movies were in the 1920s pre-sound. If you take sound, the analogous thing would be like AI and computing power. I think the power of interactive gaming and whatever it's going to do to us, we're going to hit it in 27, 28, 29, and it's going to change everything. I really believe that that's where our civilization is headed. But in terms of the geniuses, geniuses are products of the society in which they come out of. And we're seeing all kinds of people. It's just, I think the geniuses are, I don't know if they're so much Americans, certainly immigrants coming to this country, or who have a work ethic and a study ethic. But it's a different kind of thing. And there's too much distraction. There's so much going on. I think the kinds of geniuses that we have are just different. I think we're not necessarily as aware of them because they're not in the industries anymore where movies have been brought down to earth. There's no, I read an interesting article today about the Indian film industry and how many Indian film stars, which they still revere their stars the way we used to revere stars back in the day, that Indian film stars, they can be the biggest box office draws ever in India, and they can go right into politics. And they kind of have the same success in politics that they have in movies. It's a whole different thing because the Indians aren't cynical about at least that's what this article was saying. It was in The Economist. We're a cynical bunch. We want to tear down our heroes. Somebody gets too big for their britches. They call it like tall poppy syndrome down in New Zealand and Australia. If some poppy gets too high up, high and mighty, you cut it down to size. But I think it's just a different world. But again, I look at musicians, for instance, like Tina Guo, the hot Chinese electric cello player that Hans Zimmer uses. I watch her. She's the one that played the Wonder Woman theme. I look at her and I'm like, she's a genius. How many tens of thousands of hours did she put in learning how to just thrash on that electric cello? I don't know. But I think she's a genius player, and I'm sure there's a lot of people like in the classical music world. And I've seen people on on America's Got Talent or something, that kid that plays the guitar, like the flamenco guitar, but he rips out Beethoven on it and stuff. I look at that guy and I'm like, that kid's a genius. But he might not be creating brand new music, but whatever he's doing with that guitar is something I've never seen before. So I think it's different. But in terms of Hollywood, the business of Hollywood has changed. It used to be a collision of art and commerce. Now commerce is here and art is here. It's and because movies are way too expensive now. James Cameron could make Terminator for less than $5 million. And they put it in the theater. Like no one said when Terminator came out that, oh, this is just a low budget B movie. No, they were marketing as a slam bang action film. I mean, what's really interesting about Hollywood is we're watching movies like John Wick. If John Wick were made in 1983, it would have cost less than $10 million, probably like $8 million. It might have been directed by James Glickenhaus with a Tangerine Dream score or something. And it would have kicked ass, but it would have cost $8 million. So the risk was much, much lower. Well, now, how much did the last John Wick, how much did John Wick 4 cost? I'm not up on the actual, but I would imagine it somewhere north of $100 million. So what was a B movie in the 80s that would cost less than 10 is now a $150 million movie. So we're not getting, filmmakers are not even allowed to develop their career. Look at John Carpenter. I mean, John Carpenter, Halloween was $300,000. He makes Dark Star in film school, expands it into a theatrical feature. Then he makes Assault on Precinct 13 and starts playing with the Panavision aspect ratio. He makes Halloween, which becomes one of the most successful independent movies ever made. Then makes The Fog and makes Escape from New York. So before John Carpenter even made a studio movie, The Thing in 1982, he made 4 indie genre movies that were all really 5 if you include Dark Star, and they were all released theatrically. I mean, Escape from New York, how much did that cost? 4 and something. I mean, imagine, the sequel to Escape from New York was Escape from L.A., and I think they made it for $25 million. I'm sorry to say I love John Carpenter, but I'm not a fan of Escape from L.A. because all the CG and everything, it's just goofy. It doesn't have the same, it doesn't work as well. One of my favorite movies of the late 70s is The Warriors, which just came out on an incredible 4K disc from Arrow. It looks amazing. That movie didn't cost very much money. And that movie's great. It's lost none of its power. But nowadays, how can you become a genius filmmaker? I mean, there are some. If you think about whether it's whoever your favorite filmmaker is, whether it's Paul Thomas Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson is making movies that aren't hugely expensive. I mean, I know people don't dig it, but I love Phantom Thread. I think There Will Be Blood is an incredible movie. I love Boogie Nights. I love Hard Eight. Not a big Magnolia fan. I understand why people love it, but his movies, I think he's an incredible filmmaker. I think Wes Anderson's an incredible filmmaker. I think David Fincher's an incredible filmmaker. But we're not getting a lot of new genius level filmmakers because you can't develop a career with low budget indies. You make one that's really good, they immediately want to tap you to direct some big film, whether you're ready or not. Colin Trevorrow, a great example. Safety Not Guaranteed, $1 million movie. Spielberg likes it and like, how would you like to direct the next Jurassic Park, Jurassic World? And he gets $150 million. How are you supposed to have a career? So it's just a different world. But again, it's become much more market driven, and now also Hollywood used to be a domestic market. Now it's all global. So the movies that get made by the studios have to appeal to a global audience, which is kind of a bummer. But I don't know. Yeah, Sean Hoover talks about he says who remembers 1978's Laser Blast with Roddy McDowall? Is Roddy McDowall in Laser Blast? Not Kim Milford, right? Not great, but fun. My brother's best friend did the makeup for it. Cool stop motion aliens too. Yes, the two aliens in Laser Blast are great. I love Laser Blast. There's a scene in it that they put in with the Star Wars billboard that gets blown up. That's a Charles Band movie. Yeah, I like Laser Blast. I think Greg Jean built the alien spaceship for Laser Blast. Again, if you haven't seen Laser Blast, that's a lot of fun. And there's that has a really cool sci-fi laser weapon in it as well. But I don't know if Roddy McDowall's in Laser Blast. Maybe I'm misremembering it. Let me check. Maybe he is. I just remember Kim Milford. You know what? Laser Blast only gets 1.5 stars on wherever it's being rated. Fuck these people. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I don't think... Oh, Eddie D's... Oh, he is. You're right. Roddy McDowall is, I stand corrected, is in Laser Blast. He plays Dr. Melton. I'm wrong. Keenan Wynn is in this. Eddie Deason, which I forgot was in this. You're right. Roddy McDowall's in it. I didn't remember that. But yeah, Kim Milford is the main character. So if you guys haven't seen Laser Blast, it's better than 1.5 stars. I should never doubt anybody who tells me about 70s movies. So, Sean, I stand corrected. Roddy McDowall, he was in so many movies too. He was in Class of '84. If you haven't seen that, I really liked Class of '84 that Mark Lester directed. I totally forgot that Roddy McDowall was in that movie. There you go. But he's not top billed. But if you haven't seen Laser Blast, check it out. It was fun. It was like every kid's fantasy. These aliens come down to Earth. They're hunting another alien, and a weapon and an amulet gets left behind, and a kid finds it. If you found this alien weapon and you put this necklace on, don't put the necklace on because he starts to get transformed into an alien, which isn't good. Isn't good. And on that note, Sean's going to, now that I've been embarrassed, I've embarrassed myself. But any mention of Laser Blast is a good mention. I'm going to bring this chat to a close. I believe I have caught up on it. Oh, nope. Hang on. Let me make sure. Nope. I think I'm all caught up with everybody's super chats and tips. I want to thank you. Thank you all for supporting this channel generously via super chats and tips and memberships. Remember, if you're a member of the channel, we are going to have a member chat on Saturday, starting at 11 a.m. And again, they usually go for 3 or 4 hours. You're under no obligation to stay. You can pop in, say hi, and leave. We just shoot the shit and talk. And I want to thank my moderating staff. Tom Jr. Jackson is here. He's a great moderator. And thank you for being here, Tom. I want to congratulate all the Emmy Award winners. And what do you guys think? Like, subscribe, leave me a comment down below and tell me, are you excited about Noah Hawley's Alien show? Did I make it sound appealing? So, yeah, tell me what you think. And on that note, everyone, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, in space, no one can hear you scream.